This third one, admittedly, is kind of a mystery to me. And if you think you know why or how this happens, by all means, join in the comments below because I'd like to know the answer myself. What is good, everyone? Welcome to the channel. My name is Paul. I make videos about Japanese society, life, and culture from the viewpoint of a long-term foreign resident. I've been in Japan for 20 years. And today's topic are things that you come to take for granted and don't notice anymore after you've been in Japan for a length of time. The sorts of things that might stand out to you when you first come here or visit as a tourist, but over time you just forget about until maybe you head back to your home country or visit another country where these things aren't the norm, and suddenly you notice that, and it's like a reverse culture shock sort of thing. Before I get started, I want to give a quick shout out to my two newest Patreon patrons, Scruffy and Tokyo Sam. Scruffy, I think, has watched almost all of my videos in my back catalog and has commented on almost all of them. Thank you so much for being such a super fan. And Tokyo Sam has also joined the club, and he's got his own much larger YouTube channel than mine. It's a great channel. You should check it out. I'll link it below. But thank you to both of you who've come on board my Patreon. If you want to join me over there, I will link that below, and I will be releasing my How I Learn Japanese video on that Patreon page first. So it'll be an exclusive first for my patrons, and I will release it later on YouTube after a while, but it's going to be on Patreon first. So if you want to see that right away, then become a patron. Also, this particular video is sponsored by Sakuraco, and I have to say that as a company, they do such an excellent job of curating the snack boxes that they make, that if you were to order a box from them using my code and link below, you will have a really excellent experience, and I will explain more about that later. Now, the first thing that you start to take for granted over time in Japan has to do with the food service here. Now, I've spoken before about how there's always a certain level of quality that you come to expect in Japan. That even when a meal isn't superb or spectacular, it'll always be at a level that's acceptable. So you don't end up with a lot of restaurants that you say, I'll never go back there because the food was bad. I don't have any restaurants like that I can remember. Now, the other thing that I haven't mentioned though, you begin to take for granted here that your order is always correct. I have no memory of a time when I received an order, either in the restaurant or as a takeout order, where I've looked at the food and thought, this isn't what I ordered, or they got this wrong, or they forgot to include the blah blah blah. Like, I have no memory of that ever happening. I was in the habit in the States of every time I left a drive-through, I would kind of open up the bag and check inside to see if everything I ordered was in there or if they'd gotten something wrong. And I don't even bother in Japan now. I don't think to do that because I take for granted that my order is going to be correct. Now, I should add the caveat that myself and my family are not picky eaters, so we don't do a lot of substitutions, or, we don't tell them to hold the pickles or don't put the sauce on, or etc. So we don't often make special requests, and that might help. But even so, I can be back in the States for a 2-week visit and have an order come out wrong just in that time that I'm visiting. So it's something that when I thought about it, it really struck me that, yeah, they just never seem to get orders wrong in Japan. The second thing that you start to take for granted after living in Japan is if you drive or if you're a pedestrian, you should always expect at least 2, maybe 3 cars to go through the freshly turned red light. Now, where you come from, your country or your state in America or wherever, this might sound normal to you, but growing up in the Midwest, it was typically the case that maybe one person would run a red light when it had first turned, and the reaction would be like, wow, that guy is a total a-hole, right? So it's not usual in that sense. But in Japan, a freshly turned red light, you're gonna have 2, 3 cars go through it. And if you're here as a tourist, you're a pedestrian, just be aware of that could happen. Really check once the light has turned green that everyone has actually stopped. And I myself am guilty of this as a driver. I'm not flagrant about it. I mean, sometimes it will be the case where the timing is such that the light has just turned red, and so it's a matter of really hitting the brakes hard and coming to an abrupt stop, or just going through it. And I usually choose to go through it. But I don't feel guilty because 9 times out of 10, I'll check my rear view mirror and see that 2 or even 3 cars have followed after me. So yeah, I don't really feel guilty in that case because maybe I did it first, but I wasn't the most flagrant about going through the red light. And there's times when I have stopped for a red light where the person behind me ends up stopping really abruptly on my bumper, and I think, they probably thought I was gonna go through, and I screwed up their chance to go through the red light as well, so I surprised them by stopping. So just be aware of that as a driver and as a pedestrian, that the red light lasts as a green just a touch longer than you might be used to where you come from. All right, this third one, admittedly, is kind of a mystery to me. And if you think you know why or how this happens, by all means, join in the comments below because I'd like to know the answer myself. But this third one is you come to expect and be used to the idea or fact that children in Japan are quiet in public. So whatever magic parenting goes on, Japanese children tend to be a lot more quiet in public than other countries' children. And I would speak of American children myself because that's where I'm from. Like, you'll see these daycare kids out on outings in the middle of Yokohama, and the daycare providers are taking them down the street. Some of the little kids are holding their hand, and they have a tendency to have these carts. They look like a mail cart, you know, the type of cart in a post office where you push around large piles of mail and boxes, but in this case they put the children inside these carts and they're wheeling them down the street. And these are 2, 3, 4-year-olds, and they're not screaming, they're not crying, they're not like shouting or laughing. They just kind of peer over the side of the cart like inquisitive animals, like. And I don't know, like, at that age, shouldn't they be making a lot of noise? How is it that they are so quiet compared to kids elsewhere? Now, of course, if you're in a purely child-centered space, like if you're in a park with playground equipment, yeah, the kids are going to be noisy. If you enter an elementary school classroom where it's the kids' space, like they're all there with their friends and, you know, it's their room, they're going to be very noisy as well. But just in general public, on the trains, etc., the kids are so quiet. Now, my wife is Japanese and we have one child, but the child is kind of naturally quiet, very similar to me when I was a kid. I was pretty noisy with my friends, but when I was out in public, just in general, I was a very quiet, kind of shy kid, believe it or not. And my kid takes after me in that regard. So we never had to really employ any particular disciplinary measures to keep the kid in check. And it's something that, you know, friends and family back home notice when we go out to restaurants and things while visiting. Like, wow, why is your kid so well behaved? Like, they never, you know, scream or ask for things or et cetera, et cetera. And in our case, I think it was just, we were lucky. We didn't do anything in particular. But Japanese kids are just like that in general. And I don't think it's just a typical nature thing. They can't all have genetic makeup that makes them this way. So what's going on there? I honestly don't know. Now, there is one thing I can say, which is there is a cultural practice or societal practice here where parents of a newborn or very young baby tend to avoid going out. So you just don't see newborns out and about very often in Japan because the parents don't want to cause meiwaku. They don't want to cause like trouble or a scene by having a young baby that cries a lot and cries often in public, on the trains, in restaurants, etc. So parents tend to try to avoid taking really young children out. So the children you see out and about tend to be at least a year old, but more likely to be 2 or 3 years old. So it's like in the early stages, you leave the child with grandma and grandpa, or you just don't go out very much when you have a pretty newborn baby. And so you don't see them out and about. And that helps with this image that you don't have lots of noisy children in Japan. But if you think you know the solution, what you've seen from your own parenting experiences, etc., why are the kids so quiet here? Now, I have to say though that there's one thing that my kid has not been quiet about for the past week, and that is we received the second Sakuraco box, and the kid has been just bugging me to film this promotion so that we can open the box and enjoy the treats. The last box was a huge hit, especially the matcha or green tea pudding that was in that one. Well, that was a particular favorite. And so in order to allow the kid to enjoy the contents of the box this week, let's get into the Sakuraco promotion. I'm really excited to talk to you about today's sponsor, Sakuraco. Sakuraco is a curated artisan snack box from Japan that's shipped all around the world. And this month, November, the box comes to us from Ishikawa Prefecture, which is up on the Sea of Japan. And this is a very special collaboration because Ishikawa Prefecture is still recovering from a large earthquake and sizable tsunami that happened in January of this year, right around New Year's. And the fact that Sakuraco is collaborating with local snack makers up in Ishikawa is really a cool thing in my opinion. Another cool thing is the fact that I got this box and it feels like a friend dropped off a box full of omiyage or local specialty souvenirs from Ishikawa for me to enjoy, which got me thinking. Sakuraco really is focused on sending a beautiful and delicious part of Japan all around the world. But actually, I think people living in Japan might enjoy getting this as well. And I know that about 30% of the people who watch my channel are actually living here in Japan. So if you're thinking you might want to try some snacks you might not otherwise be able to from a place where you may not ever have a chance to go, then actually I would encourage you, whether you are foreign or domestic, to actually give Sakuraco box a chance. And if you use my code XChapter at checkout, you can get $5 off your first subscription order. So let's see what's in the box. So as I mentioned, Sakuraco is a monthly Japanese artisan snack box and it supports local Japanese snack makers. Each box is going to be packed with 20 traditional, authentic, and artisan Japanese snacks, including Japanese tea, and some special Japanese tableware. Upon opening the box, you get a very beautiful presentation and the all-important booklet, which gives you the information about the treats that you're going to enjoy. And this particular booklet starts off with talking about the Noto Peninsula earthquake that happened and the recovery efforts that are going on to this day. Also included in the booklet are these lovely photos of everything that you're receiving with explanation of the makers, the ingredients, and the all-important allergen information. Okay, so the snacks I've decided to try first are this kintsuba, which is a adzuki or red bean paste with a kind of lightly toasted crust over the top of it. And I chose this because I thought it would match the bocha or roasted green tea that comes with the box. I thought it would match very nicely, so I'm going to try these two together. Not too sweet. I was right, those match really nicely. Last month there was a yuzu dorayaki in the Kyoto box. This time we have yuzu senbei or rice crackers. I was actually expecting there to not be much real yuzu taste and it would be mostly just rice cracker, but that's really good. And because it's sweet, it actually goes well with the tea as well. In this month's box, there is a pair of Wakasa chopsticks, and they are lacquer chopsticks that are crafted in the Wakasa region of Fukui, which is Ishikawa's neighbor. They come in both red and black. Thanks again to Sakuraco for supporting the channel and sponsoring this video, and for supporting the artisan makers up in Ishikawa who are still responding and recovering from that earthquake in January. If you are looking for a lovely gift for a family member or for yourself, please consider Sakuraco. You are genuinely getting a nice product of delicious things from Japan, and you will be supporting the channel as well. So if you use my code XChapter, link below, you will get $5 off your first subscription order, and thank you so much. Let's get back to the video. All right, the fourth thing that you start to take for granted and just see as normal after living in Japan for a time. The opposite of the children issue is the elderly issue, which is there's just elderly people everywhere. Japan is a super aging society. And if you come here as a tourist and only spend time in Tokyo, Osaka, Kyoto, you might not notice this so much, but everywhere else in the countryside, etc., and if you live here and you travel around, you just begin to understand that there's a lot of elderly, and that the ratio of elderly to young people is probably very different from where you come from. And you just get used to it after a time. You get used to the elderly person in front of you at the supermarket, the elderly driver in front of you that's only going, 10 kilometers per hour under the speed limit. You get used to the elderly person who is walking with a cane in the middle of the sidewalk, so they're kind of hard to get around. They're just being safe because they don't want to be close to the edge. And you just have to adapt to those things and not let them bother you. Like the person in the grocery store line who's fishing out all the 1 yen coins from their purse, and you're standing there waiting to make your purchase. If that kind of thing is going to bug you forever, Japan will probably be a hard place to live. But honestly, you just get used to it and don't notice it. What makes me notice it is when I go back to the States and it's just completely different. Like my hometown, or even just going through the airport and traveling about, you get the sense that it's a much younger society in the US. And upon returning to Japan, it kind of stands out to you again that wow, there really are elderly people everywhere. But it's just a fact of life here. It's something that if you're living abroad right now, you've read about in the news, but it's something that exists on the daily level in a way that you just don't pay attention to it anymore at a certain point. The final thing that you just kind of get used to in that way, that you take for granted and really only stands out to you when you travel to another country, is you can go for a long time in Japan without having any kind of conversation with someone you don't know. Small talk is not a thing in Japan, beyond maybe saying good morning or hello to someone that you meet on the street. You can go a very, very long time without talking. I rode public transportation to my work for a pair of months in the first semester earlier this year, and I thought about it and I realized that riding the bus and the train and walking to and from the bus stop and the stations, etc., I never had a conversation with anyone for 2 months. And if you're an introvert, this is like an introvert's dream, obviously. You don't have to have any unnecessary conversations or strike up conversations with people you're not interested in. In Japan, just people stay out of your business and don't just strike up conversations. The only exception I can think of to this is in drinking establishments where people have had a few drinks and they're curious about you, the foreigner, and conversations will start to happen in that way. And you can, if you're a super extrovert, you can strike up with conversations with people if you want. If you love small talk and you don't want to give that up when you move to Japan, you'll be seen as a little strange. People will put up with it because no one's going to, complain to your face or anything like that. But it's just not normal here to do small talk and talk to people you don't know. So you just take that for granted. It becomes normal to go through your daily life and not have conversations with people, and you don't even notice that it's not happening until I go back to the States, and even the flight attendants on an American carrier will be having chit chat with the customers on the plane, and that'll be my first indication. Oh yeah, that's right. we have small talk going on if we're in America. And I don't mind it either way. Like, I get used to it. I'll have small talk and just get used to that when I return to the States. And when I come back to Japan, I just revert to not doing that. So for me, I'll chameleon either way. But yeah, it's something that might really stand out to you when you're first here and might kind of jar with your normal social expectations. Okay, that is my 5 things for today. Again, I invite you to join the Sakuraco family and get a subscription and enjoy those snacks back wherever you're from. And Most of all, I want to invite you to subscribe and like this video, because that's really the number one way to promote what I'm doing. If you really enjoy what I make and you want to help other people to see my content, please do that. Share the video as well. And most of all, I thank you for watching this particular video, and I hope to see you next week. Peace.